relying on food banks for his daily bread. Thomas Desmarais is an unemployed former soldier. He feels he's hit rock bottom, left behind by the system, a feeling propelling many of the yellow vests to protest.
I told myself, why not join this cause, which is also mine? Because if we don't act, nothing will change.
Struggling to pay the bills, he wants to see fundamental reforms.
Lower taxes. Taxes only profit the state. That way people could breathe a bit. Increase people's buying power, because the minimum wage is too low. They should increase it. And of course, they should stop making poor people poorer and rich people richer.
For Desmarais, the government's retreat from a planned fuel tax hike is too little too late, like for many yellow vests. Although their movement was sparked by that tax hike, it's grown into more widespread anger at the government. Various groups are making myriad demands, with some resorting to violent attacks on the very symbols of the French Republic. At its helm, President Emmanuel Macron, the target of much of the anger.
I'll stay involved until Mr. Macron goes. I won't stop protesting. I'm ready to do anything. I'll even go into police custody for my cause.
With online calls for further action, France is bracing for more protests and perhaps more violence.
Well, for more now, let's bring in journalist Jake Ciganero in Paris. Jake, the yellow vests have become a magnet for people with all sorts of grievances. New groups are joining the movement every day. Do they really share common goals?
That's right. I mean, earlier this week, we saw more than 100 ambulances block the Place de la Concorde. And next week, farmers are planning to join. This week, students also joined, high school students, that is. 300 high schools were affected by protests this week. And young protesters in a commune west of France even burned a car and clashed with police. You know, they all have different complaints, whether it's taxes, wages, or education, which amounts to the feeling. But it all amounts to this feeling that their living standards and their opportunities in France are on the decline. These groups don't necessarily have a common goal, but they all do have a common target for their protests, and that would be President Emmanuel Macron and his government.
Well, President Macron has made concessions to the Yellow Vest movement. Why have those concessions failed to appease the voters?
Right, he's not only made concessions, I mean, he's completely axed the green taxes on fuel and energy that originally sparked these protests a month ago. But many of the protesters and the political opposition say it's too little too late. They feel like they still have a president who is completely out of touch with the people, a president of the rich, as they've called him since before he was elected. Macron himself hasn't even publicly addressed the crisis. The last time he made a public statement was last Sunday from the G20 summit in Buenos Aires to condemn the violence of the riots on Saturday. But the government announced this morning that Macron will speak next week.
Now, some other politicians are trying to make political capital of this. Far-right leader Marine Le Pen claimed on French television that she was, quote, a yellow vest of the first hour. Are right-wing populists profiting from the movement?
Not at all. In fact, several political parties, including Marine Le Pen's far-right, National Rally, the far left, France Unbowed, socialists and right Republicans, they've all tried to latch onto this yellow vest movement with zero success. Protesters and people participating in the yellow vest movement are not really engaging with politicians of any party. And the inability of these political parties to gain traction with the yellow vest, especially the far right and the far left, which usually do well with marginalized groups, it signals that the yellow vest protesters are fed up with all figures of the political establishment.
Jake, thank you so much for that. Journalist Jake Ciganero there in Paris.